The 10% of your brain myth that just won't die. Nope, sorry, you don't have a lot of extra brain power just waiting for you to access it. By Avery Hurt. You've likely heard this wild and widely misinformed idea of one form of another. We humans only use 10% of our brains. Like a horror movie monster, the myth just won't die. Various scientists and science journalists think they've killed it, but as soon as they start to relax, it comes roaring back. The fact is, this notion of in not even close to true. One sticky idea is it's not clear how it got started, but most writers seems to think the myth that can be traced back to a popular 1936 self-help book written by public speaking teacher Dale Carnegie, How to Win Friends and Influence People, and Carnegie likely expanded on a similar concept proposed by American psychologist William James. In 1907 article first published in Science, James wrote, compared with what we ought to be, we are only half awake, our fires are dampened, our drafts are checked, we are making use of only a small part of our possible mental and physical resources. That passage certainly has flair and a bit of urgency, but it does not suggest that we use only 10% of our brains. It's also not average catchy. Probably it was the specificity of that 10% number, however, first take it on that made the myth go viral. As we say today, it's quite possible that Dale Carnegie, marketing genius, made that idea stickier by attributing it directly to the brain and putting a number of it. It says Sandra Ammon, neuroscientist and author of Welcome to Our Brain: Why You Lose Your Car Case But Never Forget How to Drive, and other puzzles of everyday life. However, it spread widely. People all over the world believe it, says Ammon. One survey about 10 years ago found that half of Brazilians believe that you only use 10% of your brain. I can imagine they were sitting around reading Dale Carnegie. Then again, his bestseller was translated into nearly every known language. Ultimately, the idea was gold to self-improvement gurus. If the 10% myth had not existed, the self-improvement crusades would have had to invent it. Neuroscientist Barry L. Beierstein wrote in an article about this myth published in the book Mind Myth, exploring popular assumptions about the mind in the brain. We think that people are excited by this pseudo fact because it's very optimistic, says Armand. Wouldn't we all love to think our brain had more giant pool of untapped potential that we are not using? The alternative, she adds, means we must face the reality of our limitations and challenges of learning. No room for doubt. Alas, the 10% myth is simply not true. There is absolutely no room for doubt about this. Ammon says functional magnetic resonance imaging fMRI has shown that all parts of the brain are active during various activities. Not all at the same time, of course, but every part of the brain has a job to do. A neuroscientist can tell you pretty much what the various parts do. The attributions of particular functions to particular parts of the brain got its start during World War II, which unfortunately sent a lot of people home with brain injuries, says Amon, studying veterans and testing them to see what they could and couldn't to do depending of where their brains were damaged, and was one of the earliest type of studies done to figure out what different parts of the brains do. Later suggests Later surgeons figure out which parts of the brain do what by electrical stimulations the brain during surgery to treat epilepsy. Before cutting into the brain, Amon explains surgeons had to make sure they weren't going to accidentally damage a part of the brain necessary for some important function, language for example. They simulated the areas around where they were planning to cut and asked the patient that just happened. Sometimes people laugh at. Sometimes remembered. They remembered something that happened when they were 8 years old, she says. But what never happened is nothing. So while the brain still has its mysteries, for example, how does it create consciousness? One thing we do know is that all of it, not just 10%, is on the job. That might not be bad news, though. In recent years, scientists have learned that the brain is far more plastic than we used to think, able to create new pathways for new tasks or to recover from damage. Our brains might not have huge uptaped reserves, but what they do have is pretty remarkable.